Beloved listeners, prepare yourselves. A silent storm hangs over Gotham, heavier than the clouds that choke its moonlight. Tonight, the city trembles beneath an enemy it cannot name, a force moving through its streets with the precision of a nightmare, and for the first time in history, Batman is nowhere to be seen. Sirens die mid-how, power grids fail without reason, criminal networks go dark as if swallowed by something far worse than fear. And just as Gotham begins to collapse into a darkness too deep for even its dark night to navigate, a tear of light rips open the sky. From it descends not a monster, not a god, but Earth's mightiest heroes summoned into a world that doesn't trust them, doesn't know them, and doesn't want them. Yet if they fail, Gotham falls forever. It began on a night colder than it should have been, the kind of cold that seeped into the bones of Gotham, whispering that something was coming. Tony Stark noticed it first. Not the chill, but the anomaly behind it. He stood inside the Avengers Tower, staring at holograms flickering with instability, dimensional friction, collapsing between universes like tectonic plates grinding against each other. A soft alert beeped from the screen, an energy signature, unlike anything the Avengers had recorded. Stark frowned, zooming in. A spike of power, profound and chaotic, originating from a city that his maps didn't recognize. Not New York, not Chicago, somewhere else entirely. When Thor stepped beside him, lightning still crackling faintly across his armor from training, he sensed the tension instantly. Stark muttered that something was wrong with space itself, like someone was punching holes through reality. And just as Thor asked who could do such a thing, the tower lights flickered, alarms blared, and a portal tore itself open above the landing platform with a deafening roar. The Avengers assembled instinctively, weapons raised, powers flaring. But instead of an attacking force, they saw a vision, the silhouette of a tall man shrouded in shadows. A voice echoed, not spoken, but felt an urgent plea drowned in static. 3 words cut through clearly: Gotham needs help. Before anyone could ask what Gotham was, the platform exploded with blinding light, pulling them through the portal, compressing them, stretching them, hurling them across existence until the world around them dissolved. When they hit the ground, they hit hard. They emerged in the center of a city unlike any of theirs, a place built from concrete and fear, a place that looked like it hadn't seen sunlight in decades. Stark's armor recalibrated mid-fall. Cap landed shield first. Thor smashed into the pavement, sending a shockwave through abandoned cars, but something else landed, too. A scream echoed through the alleyways nearby. Natasha ran toward it first, weapons drawn. She found a terrified civilian hiding behind a dumpster, pointing toward the rooftops. A shape moved there fast, agile, predatory. Clint nocked an arrow. Thor summoned Mjolnir, but the shadow vanished. Before they could process the threat, a low hum filled the street. Tony looked up, and his face lost all color. Cloaked drones, sleek, silent machines emerged from the fog, scanning the heroes with an unsettling red glow. They were unlike Ultron's design, yet disturbingly familiar in intent. The city recognized the Avengers as intruders. Then the drones attacked. Lasers cut across the narrow streets. Cap's shield ricocheted metal sparks through the air. Thor cleaved a machine in 2, lightning searing through its circuitry. Natasha flipped over another, driving both batons into its core. Stark blasted 3 from the sky in a single sweep, but dozens more emerged from the darkness as if birthed by the city itself. It wasn't an ambush, it was a warning. Clint shouted that the drones weren't targeting civilians, only them. Someone had programmed these machines with surgical precision, and that was when a familiar symbol flickered onto the nearest drone's cracked visor. A bat. Tony froze. Cap's grip tightened. Thor's eyes narrowed. Not Batman's warning symbol. A distorted version of it. Something or someone had corrupted it. Something or someone had corrupted it. The drones retreated just as suddenly as they had appeared, melting into the fog like ghosts, obeying a master's command. The street fell silent except for the ragged breaths of the heroes. Stark scanned the city skyline. He spotted a looming structure far above the others, a tower crowned with a glowing encrypted beacon, pulsating in a pattern that wasn't random at all. It was a code, a call, a trap, Cap suggested, regrouping, forming a plan. But Stark shook his head. They weren't alone here. Someone was watching. Someone had dragged them into this world. And Tony was determined to find out who. A single thought echoed through every Avenger's mind. Where is Batman? Rain began to fall as the Avengers moved deeper into Gotham, not in droplets, but in sheets thick, cold, and heavy enough to drown the sound of their own footsteps. The city felt alive in a way that none of them were prepared for. It watched them. It judged them. Every rooftop, every alleyway, every flickering street lamp seemed wired into something larger, something sentient. Cap led the way, shield raised, scanning every shadow. Natasha kept to the sides, staying low, every sense sharpened. Clint watched the rooftops, whispering that someone had been pacing them since the moment they arrived, and Thor's grip on Mjolnir tightened each time the thunder responded to him, as if even the storm were cautious. Tony's HUD flickered again. He muttered that someone was hacking him mid-flight. No one had ever breached his systems this quietly. He followed the source to a signal perched high above the skyline. Wayne Tower. He knew the name from somewhere. He couldn't place it, but the signal radiating from that tower was unmistakably intentional. It pulsed like a heartbeat guiding them forward. When they reached the tower entrance, Thor forced the doors open with a twist of his wrist. The inside was pitch black. Emergency lights flickered red, casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. Stark's scanners picked up traces of energy, consistent with Porto technology, but not any kind of technology he recognized. Something older. Something mixed with fear, discipline, and brutal efficiency. Cap whispered for everyone to spread out. Natasha found the first clue, a shattered comlink lying in a pool of dried blood. Clint spotted claw marks on the reinforced steel walls, marks that didn't come from any weapon he knew. Stark scanned them and frowned. These weren't from an animal. They were deliberate, patterned, coded into a language only one man could have left behind. Batman had been here, and something had hunted him. As they advanced, a low hum filled the corridor. A hologram flickered to life before them, glitching, broken, but still recognizable. It was Bruce Wayne, or what was left of his last message. He didn't explain what had happened. He didn't explain the drones. All he said was a single sentence before the hologram collapsed. If you're seeing this, it's already inside the city. Thor stepped forward, demanding answers no one could provide. The Avengers exchanged glances. Tony replayed the message fragment, isolating the words. Inside the city. Not someone. Something. Cap felt it before he saw it. A shift in the air. A tremor in the ground. Natasha drew her weapons instantly. Clint moved back to the wall. Thor lifted Mjolnir. They were no longer alone. A figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the hall. At first they thought it was Batman. The silhouette was eerily similar, but the way it walked was wrong. Too stiff. Too mechanical. Lights pulsed along its limbs. Its eyes glowed with an unholy crimson. Tony whispered one word under his breath. Not Batman. The creature lunged first, faster than any human. Cap barely raised his shield in time as it struck with enough force to send him skidding across the marble floor. Thor swung, but the creature vanished into the air, reappearing behind Clint, who barely escaped with a backward roll. Natasha fired a grappling line, but the creature tore it apart mid-flight. Tony finally locked onto it with a repulsor blast. The shot hit dead on, slamming the creature into a wall. For a moment, it lay still, sparks flickering from its armor. Then its chest plate cracked open. Inside wasn't machinery. Inside wasn't flesh. Inside was void. A swirling, twisting mass of black energy that seemed to devour the light around it. Stark's sensors shut down instantly. Thor staggered back. Natasha's breath caught in her throat. Cap braced himself for impact. They were facing something built from Gotham's darkness itself. The creature rose again, its head tilting like it was, studying them, learning them, and then it spoke, but not with a human voice. It spoke with hundreds of voices, overlapping, echoing from the walls, the floors, the ceiling. It tried to stop me. Cap shouted for Stark to fall back. Thor struck the creature with lightning so bright it lit half the ruined lobby, but the energy absorbed into the void-like chest as if swallowed whole. Clint managed to land an explosive arrow that tore off part of its mask, revealing a face with no features, just a black swirling abyss where a face should be. He failed. The creature moved again, faster this time. Its blow caught Thor in the ribs, lifting him off his feet and sending him crashing through a pillar. Natasha slid beneath the thing's arm, planting a shock disc on its spine. It detonated in a burst of electricity, forcing the creature to stagger. Cap charged and slammed his shield into its chest with everything he had. This time, the creature wasn't prepared. It flew backward into the wall, cracking it in a spiderweb pattern. Tony fired again. The creature dissolved into shadow and vanished. Only its final whisper remained, echoing through the empty hall. "He is gone." Thor rose, bruised but furious. He demanded to know what had taken Batman. What poison could turn a city into a hunting ground? Stark stared into the darkness, where the creature had disappeared, piecing together fragments of data. Someone hadn't summoned them to save Gotham. Someone had summoned them to survive it. For the first time since arriving, the Avengers felt the full weight of Gotham press against their chests. The city wasn't just dark. It was drenched in something older and crueler, something that seeped into the bones of anyone who dared walk its streets. Rain hammered the pavement as they regrouped outside Wayne Tower, each hero shaken not by injury but by the realization that their enemy was not just powerful, it was evolving. Tony hovered above the street, armor flickering as he rerouted power to counter the interference. He scanned the skyline, tracing the residual energy signature of the creature. It pulsed across Gotham like a heartbeat, irregular, scattered, but always growing stronger. Cap stood beside him, trying to steady his breath. He could still hear the creature's voice echoing through the building. "He is gone." Natasha examined a piece of shattered metal torn from the creature's armor. It wasn't constructed. It was grown, a hybrid of steel and shadow, fused together by some unnatural process. Clip whispered that Gotham didn't feel like a city anymore. It felt like a graveyard waiting to be filled. Thor raised his hammer. Storm clouds churned overhead. He could sense darkness answering the lightning, feeding on it. Something in the city was alive enough to hunger. Tony finally traced the creature's path to a new location, Arkham Asylum. The team exchanged grim looks. If this thing had come from anywhere in Gotham, it was there. They moved as a unit through the streets, passing skittering shapes that ducked into alleys, echoes of distant screams, windows that slammed shut the moment they looked up. The deeper they went, the more the city leaned inward, suffocating them. Arkham rose like a monument of forgotten nightmares, its gates twisted, its windows shattered, its walls marked with clawed symbols carved by hands that no longer remembered being human. The doors were open, as if welcoming them inside. Cap stepped through first. The smell hit them instantly, stale air mixed with damp stone and something metallic beneath it. Tony's senses glitched again. The asylum was filled with electromagnetic interference. None of it was natural. They found the first cell block completely unattended. Doors hung open, restraints broken, security systems corrupted with looping lines of code that didn't come from any human programmer. Natasha examined the consoles, noticing patterns. They weren't random. They were messages. Hell made them another, scratched into a wall by human fingernails long since broken. He took her. Cap's jaw tightened. Clint lowered his bow, staring into the cell. Not a single inmate remained. The asylum was empty. Not a scar tempted. Thor murmured that the air tasted of madness and fear, and something else. Whispers. They drifted through the hallway like crawling fog, the voices of dozens of people blending together into incomprehensible murmurs. Natasha tensed, looking behind them. No one. Yet the voices grew louder, filling the asylum, circling them, whispering secrets they weren't supposed to hear. Stark activated a light flare. The shadows recoiled as if burned. Cap moved forward, following the whispering hallways until they opened into the main chamber. Massive room with shattered observation windows and overturned medical equipment. In the center stood a single operating table, flooded by moonlight pouring through a broken ceiling. On the table lay a figure. At first, Cap thought it was Batman. The shape was right, the armor similar but torn apart, the body limp. He ran toward it. Thor and Tony followed. Clint and Natasha watched their backs. Cap reached the table and froze. It wasn't Bruce. It was someone else wearing a corrupted, incomplete version of the Batsuit. A man with pale, trembling skin, eyes wide with terror, mouth barely moving. Stark scanned him. Alive, barely. His vitals were shredded, as if his very essence had been drained. Cap leaned closer. The man whispered through cracked lips. "Run." The lights died. The chamber plunged into absolute darkness. Not the absence of light, something thicker. Something alive. Tony's armor shut down entirely. Thor's lightning fizzled. Natasha and Clint felt the cold breath of something moving behind them. The shadows peeled away from the walls. It stepped forward. Not a creature this time, a man, tall, broad, cloaked in a twisted version of the Batman symbol. The emblem stretched and warped across armor, made from the same void-like material the creature had shown. His cape moved like smoke. His eyes burned white, not with justice, but hunger. Tony recognized the energy signature instantly. This was the source. Cap whispered the name under his breath. Not Batman. The man tilted his head. When he spoke, the voice was familiar, echoing with something terrible within it. I tried to save them. Thor stepped forward, demanding his name. The man's face twitched. Not Bruce Wayne anymore. Something else. Something trapped. Something infected. He continued speaking, each word trembling with the weight of memories. The darkness. It wasn't a monster. It was a weapon. A living program born inside the city, feeding on its fears. I fought it. I failed. It didn't kill me. It wore me. Cap raised his shield. Clint drew an arrow. Natasha braced a move. The infected Batman took a step closer, and in a voice that was part Bruce, part the void consuming him, he spoke. Gotham doesn't need saving. It needs cleansing. Before they could react, he sank into the floor itself, becoming shadow, reappearing behind Clint with a swipe that sent him crashing into a wall. Thor swung, but his hammer passed through as if hitting smoke. Natasha dodged a strike that cracked the ground open behind her. Cap blocked a blow that nearly shattered his arm. Tony's systems rebooted just in time to lock onto the corrupted figure. The battle ignited instantly. The room exploded into chaos. Lightning clashed with shadow. Repulsors shattered equipment. The infected Batman moved with speed and brutality far beyond Bruce's skill of attack, a blend of martial precision and supernatural force. He struck Tony so hard the armor cracked. Thor bled. Natasha limped. Cap fought harder than he had in years, but even his strength was failing. The infected Batman rose above them, shadows swirling, forming into wings of darkness stretching across the ceiling. He whispered a final decree. Tonight, Gotham is mine. The infected Batman descended with the force of a collapsing building, slamming into the center of the chamber and unleashing a shockwave of living shadow that threw every Avenger across the room. Cap crashed into a steel beam. Natasha struck a broken console. Clint rolled across shattered glass. Thor skid across the floor, carving deep cracks beneath him. Tony barely stabilized himself midair as the shadows coiled upward like serpents, reacting to the corrupted Batman's will. He moved differently, now less human, more like a storm given shape. Every flick of his wrist sent tendrils of darkness whipping across the room. Every step made the floor groan under a weight that wasn't physical, but spiritual. A burden Gotham had carried for far too long. Thor struck first, launching himself at the corrupted figure with a roar. Lightning cascaded around him, illuminating the chamber like a solar flare. But when his hammer collided with Batman's shadow-armored gauntlet, the energy was swallowed whole. A pulse of dark matter exploded from the point of impact, sending Thor tumbling across the room. Cap charged next, absorbing a blow on his shield that nearly broke his stance. The shield vibrated with unnatural tremors, as if the darkness was trying to seep through it. Cap pushed back with every ounce of strength he had, gritting his teeth, refusing to yield. But the infected Batman lifted him by the throat with one hand, shadows tightening like chains around his neck. Tony blasted the corrupted figure with a concentrated repulsor beam, freeing Cap, but the beam barely singed the armor. Tony hovered higher, attempting to analyze the distortion field emanating from Batman. The readings were impossible. The darkness wasn't just energy. It was a parasite, a symbiotic force fused with Bruce's willpower, his trauma, his fear, twisted into something catastrophic. Natasha moved with precision, using the shadow's rhythm to slip through gaps in its movement. She planted 2 shock charges on Batman's spine. They detonated, sending ripples along the corrupted armor. For a moment, one fleeting moment, Bruce's real face flickered through the veil of darkness, his eyes filled with desperation and pain. He whispered something, "Stop me." Then the darkness surged back with fury, hurling Natasha across the room. Clint fired a sonic arrow that disrupted the shadows, forcing Batman to stagger. Stark saw an opening and charged his unibeam, firing a blinding stream of energy directly into the corrupted emblem on Batman's chest. The symbol crackled violently, its shape distorting as though tearing between 2 realities. Batman recoiled, tactually recoiled, as if the light was burning the parasite, Thor seized the moment. Lightning erupted from his hammer as he slammed it into the ground, creating a dome of pure light that pushed the darkness back. The infected Batman screamed, a sound not entirely his own, as the shadows writhed and shrank away from the light. For the first time, the Avengers were winning. Tony analyzed the reaction. Light, pure, radiant, unwavering light was the weakness. Not sunlight, not electricity. Something else. Something symbolic. Something tied to the will of the man trapped inside the monster. Cap understood it instantly. Bruce Wayne's greatest strength had always been his unbreakable resolve, his relentless defiance, his refusal to surrender to fear. That part of him was still inside, fighting, and they needed to give him something to fight for. Cap called out to him loudly, his voice echoing across the ruins of the asylum. He didn't shout at the monster. He spoke to the man. "Bruce, you don't give up. Gotham needs you, not this thing twisting you." The infected Batman froze. The shadows rippled uncertainly. Tony followed suit, amplifying his external speakers. "Bruce, listen to me. You brought us here? Not the thing controlling you. You did." Natasha, bruised and bleeding, forced herself up and shouted too. "We're not here to replace you. We're here to save you." Clint knocked another arrow, his voice steady, despite the tremor in his hands. "Fight it, Bruce. Fight it like only you can." Thor stepped forward, lifting Mjolnir, its lightning forming a circle of radiant light around the fallen Avengers. "Prove to your city, and to yourself, that the night does not rule you. You rule it." The chamber fell silent. The shadows hissed, resisting, coiling tighter around the corrupted Batman as if terrified that the man beneath might awaken. The void-like armor pulsed erratically, cracks of white light splitting through its surface. Bruce's voice emerged not in a whisper this time, but a roar of agony. "I am not. This is." The shadows convulsed. Light burst from his chest in a violent shockwave. The parasite screamed as the brightness consumed it, tearing it from Bruce's body, peeling away its armor, its tendrils, its living void. The creature tried to escape, forming into a monstrous silhouette on the ceiling, but Thor's lightning struck it. Tony's unibeam pinned it. Clint's explosive arrow pierced it. Natasha's shock charges detonated beneath it, and Cap hurled his shield through the center of it, splitting the parasite into fragments of dissolving shadow. The darkness evaporated. Silence fell. Bruce collapsed to the floor, unconscious but alive. The moonlight cut through the shattered ceiling, illuminating him as if Gotham itself was sighing with relief. Tony lowered himself beside Bruce, scanning him. The infection was gone, the parasite destroyed. Bruce Wayne was free. Thor leaned on his hammer. Cap dropped to one knee. Natasha and Clint exhaled as if they'd been holding their breath for hours. The city outside fell quiet. No more whispers, no more drones, no more living shadows. Just Gotham, bruised, scarred, trembling but itself again. In the hours that followed, the Avengers brought Bruce to the surface, where the early hints of dawn touched Gotham for the first time in days. Bruce woke slowly, his voice hoarse, his eyes softer than they had ever seen. He thanked him not as Batman, but as a man who had nearly lost himself. Tony smiled and told him he'd leave Gotham's night to its rightful guardian. Cap placed a hand on Bruce's shoulder and said the Avengers were always ready to stand with him, not in his place. Bruce nodded once, deeply. When the portal reopened above the skyline, closing the fracture that had brought them, here the Avengers stepped through without hesitation. Bruce watched them go, the wind brushing against his cape, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. Gotham had been protected, not by gods, not by soldiers, not by one man, but by heroes who understood that even the darkest city deserves a fighting chance. When night returned, Gotham's skies were calm, its shadows quiet. And atop a rooftop, Batman stood again, no longer consumed by darkness, but strengthened by the reminder that even the greatest warrior needs help sometimes. The lesson lingered in the air like a promise. Even in the darkest places, light survives when heroes stand together. The night settled over Gotham once more, not as a threat, but as a reminder. A reminder that even the strongest protector can falter, and even the darkest city can be lifted by shared strength. When the Avengers returned to their world, Gotham was quieter, steadier, no longer trembling under the weight of an unseen enemy. And Bruce Wayne, scarred but unbroken, rose again to reclaim his mantle not as a monster born of shadows, but as the guardian forged from them. In the end, the story of this night was not about gods descending or worlds colliding. It was about resilience, about the courage to keep fighting even when the darkness wears your face. And as Batman stood watch over the city he vowed to protect, he carried with him a truth the Avengers had reminded him of. No hero stands alone, and no night is ever too deep for the dawn that follows. Because in Gotham, as in every world, hope is the one thing darkness can never swallow.